Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all 3 past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code 1FREEPP for a free single card today.
Hi everyone, David Aragona here with another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series, and we've got a stacked prep on tap this weekend at Fairgrounds. The final race on their marathon 14-race card is the Grade 2 Risen Star. This one going 1 1/8 for the 3-year-olds, and definitely the highest quality of any of the Derby preps that we've analyzed so far this year. 12 runners signed on, and really, there are 7 of them that you could make a case as being legitimate Derby contenders at this stage, and they're all going to be facing off in this race. Makes sense. This is the first 50 qualifying point to the winner prep race. I think in total 105 points on the line with 25 to second. So horses in this race could solidify a spot in the Kentucky Derby starting gate, arguably with a win or a second place finish. So we'll see how that all develops with the points race in coming months, but definitely some talented 3-year-olds in this field, including a few making their debuts for their sophomore season. The morning line favorite is the number 11 Track Phantom. He is the slight favorite at 7-2 over the number 4 Sierra Leone at 4-1. It'll be interesting to see where the public goes and which one of these 2 horses ultimately does go favorite. It feels like they will be the 2 that garner the most wagering attention, but horses like Honor Marie, Catching Freedom coming off stakes wins, Hall of Fame, the other Steve Asmussen runner coming off a very fast maiden victory. So a lot of intrigue in this Risen Star, and we'll go through all of the contenders. Before we get to them, though, let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this race to get a sense of how this pace might develop on the front end, because the number 7 Hall of Fame, who was shown on the early lead, he's definitely a horse that possesses tactical speed, and the reason that he's shown out in front of his stablemate Track Phantom is that Hall of Fame is coming out of a 1.16 race where the pace was pretty fast, and while he wasn't leading that day, he was contesting that fast early pace. On the other hand, Track Phantom, who competed the same day in the Lecomte, he was setting a much slower pace, but doing so on the front end. So from a running style standpoint, I think Track Phantom is more of the confirmed front-running type than the stablemate Hall of Fame, but the inexperienced Hall of Fame definitely is coming out of a faster paced race. So that's the explanation for why Hall of Fame is shown in front of Track Phantom early. I would imagine Joel Rosario on Track Phantom will be looking to get this horse forward, potentially over to the front end, and we'll just see how aggressive Ricardo Santana is on Hall of Fame. But it does seem like Steve Asmussen has the potential to control this race on the front end. There is that fast-paced flag showing on the pace projector. I think a large function of that is just how the size of the field, and there are so many runners in this race, and the fact that we don't know how much speed we're going to get from long shots like the number 9 Cardinal or the number 12 B Dancer, who's stretching out from a sprint race. So there definitely is some different factors that could influence this pace as far as horses going forward, but it does seem like those 2 Steve Asmussen horses do possess the most early speed. Well, let's go through this field in post-position order, and I think we can get through the first 2 runners drawn down towards the inside pretty quickly. The number 1 as well as the number 2, Awesome Ruta. They are both long shots in this race. As for Tizzy Indy, the number 1 horse, he's coming out of a 5th place finish in the Lecomte, distantly beaten that day, going off at upwards of 60-1. Was really no match for the winner, Track Phantom, or really any of the main protagonists in that race. Just would need a huge step up from a speed figure standpoint, running a good race against a class of horses that he's never seen before. So he's a little hard to make a case for. And you could say the same about the number 2, Awesome Ruta, a horse who will have to go this distance for the first time. He did try 1.16 in late November at Fairgrounds and was not successful. Easily beaten by Sneed, who came back to run well in the Gun Runner at his next start, but obviously Awesome Ruta nowhere near that foe at the wire that day. Visually, to me, he looks like more of a sprinting type. So the 9 furlong distance, which is a question for all of these horses, it's a big question for a horse like this who has yet to show the necessary stamina. But let's get to one of the major contenders in this race, and that is the number 3, Honor Marie. We'll take a look at his past performances in TimeformUS, and a couple of things you'll notice about this deep closer is that he's done well in a couple of races that have featured blue color-coded pace figures. That was the case 2 back when he faced Allowance Company in that sloppy track 7 furlong race that was dominated on the front end by the winner, Otto the Conqueror. And Honor Marie made a nice run around the far turn to get up for second that day, well ahead of the classy 3rd place finisher Just Steel, and I liked the run out past the wire as this horse was really going after the winner on the gallop out that day, and he proved that more distance was to his liking when he stepped up into stakes company in the Kentucky Jockey Club last time. Now, from a race flow standpoint, that was a race that did come apart more so than you might expect based on that blue color-coded TimeformUS pace figure for that middle split. But still, I thought Anna Marie ran really well to make that big run from last place, that slingshot move around the field to take the lead by the 3/16 pole, and then drawing off convincingly to the wire, beating today's rival, Real Men Violin, who also is back in this race. Anna Marie just seems like a horse that was stepping forward with each and every start last year. He's bred to go longer. He's not the flashiest horse in terms of his physical makeup or his training coming into this race, but he just seems like a really solid, hard trier in his races, and I think he's going to give a good account of himself as he makes his 3-year-old debut here. Number 4 is Sierra Leone. Let's take a look at his most recent start in the Remsen Stakes. Actually, both he and Moonlight are coming out of this race. We'll get to Moonlight in just a little bit, but highlighted here is Sierra Leone, who's making that big sweeping move around the field from last up into about second by the time they reach the 8th pole, going after the eventual winner, Dornoch. And you can see Sierra Leone blows right by Dornoch here at the 16th pole, but Dornoch is going to dig in and come back on Sierra Leone to the wire. I think there's a narrative around this race that Sierra Leone's greenness maybe prevented him from finishing off this race. When I watched the Remsen, though, I was more impressed by the way Dornoch dug in. And I think you have to note, at the top of the stretch, Dornoch actually veered in and bumped it off the inside rail, which cost him some momentum. So I think that slowing up that people perceived by Sierra Leone at the wire was just more a case of Dornoch regaining his momentum and coming back, because Sierra Leone was continuing to open up on the rest of the field. It wasn't like he was pulling himself up at the end of that race, and he gave no physical signs that he was doing so, not by pricking his ears or the things that you typically look for horse that's pulling himself up coming to the wire. Sierra Leone, he's been pretty professional in his races. In his debut, he didn't get the fastest speed figure, but you really had to like the way he finished off that race after he moved out into the clear at the top of the stretch. He's this big, sizable son of Gunrunner who's got a really powerful stride on him. Definitely seems like the 1.125 is right up his alley, and he proved that last time in the Remsen. You do see that red color-coded race rating indicator around that 113 for the Remsen under next to the race conditions and the TimeformUS PPs. That indicates that it was a speed favoring track on December 2nd. I think a lot of people who have talked about this day, it was the Cigar Mile day, the day they ran the Remsen, that the rail was really the place to be on that card. And I think that was a function of why you saw so many horses winning towards the front end. The winner was with the track, Dornoch, though the pace of that race was pretty quick. And Dornoch, I should say, Sierra Leone did take advantage of that fast pace. So even though he closed against that track bias, he was still with the flow of a race that was falling apart towards the end. So I think some interesting things to note about the trip last time for Sierra Leone. One more factor to take into account with this horse is Chad Brown is putting blinkers on for the first time. Well, to show a DRF formulator fact for Chad Brown, adding blinkers in graded stakes races over the past 5 years, he's 0 for 14. Now, it's not a terrible stat when you look at some of the second and third place finishers, because 6 of those 14 runners did finish second or third, but still, Chad Brown runners typically go off at short prices, and adding blinkers in this situation is not something that he's had a ton of success with in the past. And it's just another variable for a horse that is lightly raced. And I wonder if that addition of blinkers is a bit of an overreaction to that narrative about the Remsen last time out. The number 5, Moonlight, is also coming out of the Remsen, and he just didn't run quite as well as Sierra Leone in that race. I thought he got a pretty good trip, all things considered. The pace, like I said, it was fast. He was towards the back early. He was making up ground towards the end as they came I should say passing horses in the final quarter mile, but he wasn't really making up ground on the eventual winner, Dornoch. And also, he was more with the track than Sierra Leone was, whereas Sierra Leone made that big wide move around the turn. Moonlight was just saving ground around the far turn, angling inside at the quarter pole. So he was much more with the track profile that day. And it's hard for me to make the case that he's going to turn the tables on a horse like Sierra Leone. The number 6 is Real Men Violin, and he finished behind a horse we already talked about, Anna Marie, when they both faced off in the Kentucky Jockey Club last time. Real Men Violin has a nice foundation from his 2-year-old season. He already raced 6 times. I think that's tied for the most of anybody in this field. Some starts on the turf, also ran extensively on the dirt, and I think showed that he is more of a dirt horse last year. It took him a couple starts to break the maiden on that surface, but he did beat today's rival Track Phantom when he finally broke through at the maiden ring. lengths two back. Got a very good trip that day, racing on the inside, cutting the corner, sneaking up the rail at the top of the stretch, and also got a pretty good trip last time in the Kentucky Jockey Club. He did have to wait in some traffic coming around the far turn, and arguably he might have been closer to the winner at the end if he had been able to move a little bit sooner. But at the end of the day, he got that path opening up at the top of the stretch, was able to scoot up on through there, and could not finish as strongly as the winner, Anna Marie, who came charging down the center of the racetrack. So, real Men Violin, it was a solid effort. I think he still has to answer the question of whether or not he's going to get better going the mile and an eighth distance. I've watched some of his training for this race, and I would have liked to see a little bit more spark from him in the morning. To my eye, he was outworked recently by his female counterpart, stablemate VV's Dream in a recent workout. So, don't love to see that for a horse that's coming back off a layoff. The number 7 is Hall of Fame, and he's the horse that is coming in with the highest last out TimeformUS speed figure. That 121 just sort of towers above this field. I think the second highest TimeformUS speed figure of anybody in this race belongs to his stablemate, Track Phantom, whose best number is a 114. So Hall of Fame, if he repeats that last number, he's going to be a major player in this race. The big question with Hall of Fame is, can he make that jump up from maiden winner to graded stakes winner and basically cement himself as one of the top contenders marching towards the Kentucky Derby? It's a big ask in just the third start of his career. And he was beating a field that was just inferior to him last time. And you'll notice that he won that race by over 10 lengths. So it doesn't really matter who was behind him. But I did like the way that he did it. You see those red color coded pace figures for the first 3 splits of that maiden event. And like I said, towards the top of this preview, that race was run on the same day as the Lecomte, going the same distance, and Hall of Fame was just chasing a much faster pace than the 3-year-olds had to encounter in the Lecomte. And Hall of Fame was the only horse in that maiden race that was able to sustain his speed all the way through the wire, and that's why he opened up such a margin to the finish line. Now, Steve Asmussen does not have the best stats moving horses up from maiden victories into graded stakes dirt routes in their next starts. I looked up this stat in Formulator with horses that just won their maidens in graded stakes races. He's 1 for 25, only a 4% win rate with a 32-cent ROI, 0 for 7 with 3-year-olds in that sample. So not the best statistic for Hall of Fame, but definitely based on the last race, this horse does have real ability. The number 8 is Catching Freedom, and we'll take a look at his most recent race when he won the Smarty Jones at Oaklawn. And you'll watch this horse at the top of the stretch. You can see he still has some greenness to work out. He switched over to his left lead right here. He's going to get a correction with the left-handed whip, switch back over to his right lead. And once he does that, he's able to gain momentum and finish off this race and run through the wire like a mile and an eighth is not going to be a problem for him as he stretches out to this new distance for the first time. But what I don't like about Catching Freedom is that he's shown this unprofessionalism in just about every start of his career so far. It was really on display two back in that optional claiming race at Churchill Downs, where Florent Giroux, who was riding him that day, was trying to get him out into the clear. It was really Catching Freedom just being his own worst enemy. He was trying to lug in. Florent was trying to get him to angle outside of a couple of leaders at the top of the stretch, and that horse was just refusing to go outside of those two. Eventually, the winner ranged up outside of him and sort of locked in Catching Freedom, which forced him to steady at an inopportune time of the race. He finally did maneuver to the outside and finish off that race pretty well, and we saw in the Smarty Jones the way that he could finish once he's able to get that clear run through the stretch. But now he's stepping up into the largest field that he's ever faced, 12 runners in this race. He's going to have to negotiate traffic, likely coming from towards the back of the pack, and I'm just a little bit concerned about a horse that has shown those unprofessional tendencies getting the right trip in this race. There's obviously ability here, but I do wonder a little bit about that, and also how much money he's going to take off that Smarty Jones victory last time, because I think a lot of people are aware that's proven to be a live race. The second place finisher, Just Steel, and the fifth place finisher, Mystic Dan, both came back to finish first and second in the recent Southwest Stakes, so Catching Freedom could attract a lot of money based on those form lines. The number 9 is Cardinal. Let's take a look at his most recent start when he was narrowly beaten second at Gulfstream Park in an optional claiming event. Beaten this day by Change of Command, who was the heavy favorite in this race. And change of command came into the Sam F. Davis last week as one of the favorites and was very disappointing in that race. Got a decent trip stalking the pace and just basically went backwards through the stretch. So I think that's a real indictment of the quality of this optional claimer that Cardinal is exiting. Even though the speed figure came back strong, a 108, that puts him on the fringes of being competitive in this race. I think you really do have to question how strong that allowance race really was. It's not like this horse ran a particularly fast speed figure in his maiden win back in November. So just not sure about the overall quality of this Todd Pletcher trainee. Note, he does take the blinkers off for this race, so you wonder if he's going to show quite as much speed as he did in that last start. The number 10 is Resilience. He's also coming out of a two-turn victory in a recent race down at Gulfstream Park. We'll take a look at the stretch run of that race, and he wins this fairly convincingly. I will note, though, that the margin of victory might have been somewhat exaggerated because the second place finisher in this race skipped the line. If you watch the race from the entire far turn run, he ran into some real traffic, lost momentum at a critical stage. So the margin would have been much closer between the first and second finishers of this race if that runner-up did not have the trouble. And at the end of the day, Resilience is just going to have to get faster because that 101 TimeformUS speed figure last time out, it doesn't quite cut it against some major players on the Kentucky Derby trail who will be facing in here who have simply run faster in recent starts. He did finish ahead of main rival Track Phantom 3 back in a maiden race at Churchill Downs back in early October, but that was Track Phantom's debut, and he's clearly come a long way since then, and it's not clear if Resilience has taken that same step forward. So he's going to be a price in this race, but he is a horse that does need to improve. The number 11 is Track Phantom, who we're just referring to. And he took a couple starts to break his maiden, finally got the job done in the third start of his career. And since then, he's just been unstoppable. He's reeled off 3 in a row, including a couple of stakes victories. The Lecomte last time, it was sort of a walk in the park for this horse. His main rival, Nash, I think it's proven at this point that he hasn't really gone forward since an impressive maiden victory at Churchill last year. So Track Phantom was able to easily beat that rival for the second time in a row. But to me, the race that really points out Track Phantom as a legitimate Kentucky Derby threat is his Gun Runner 2 back, because that was a race that featured a strong early pace. You see that red color coded TimeformUS pace figure for the half mile time. Another horse in that race, Next Level, took a big shot at Track Phantom through the opening half mile of that race. Those two really drew off from the rest of the field, battling on the front end. Track Phantom just flicked that rival away around the far turn and was able to finish off that race impressively, holding off a quality closer in Snead. That 114 TimeformUS speed figure, that's the highest number that anybody in this field has earned outside of that maiden win by Hall of Fame. So Track Phantom, he's shown that real quality. Did take a slight step backwards from a speed figure standpoint last time with Lecomte, but I think that was just a stepping stone to this bigger test, and the Risen Star strikes me as a horse that is going to get the mile and eighth distance, and based on how sharply he breaks from the gate, his tactical speed, he just feels like a horse that is going to get yet another good trip breaking from this outside post position. And finally, the number 12 is B Dancer. The connections are taking a big shot with this horse. He just broke his maiden on Lecomte Day, going the distance of 6 furlongs. And while he did well to win his debut race in pretty impressive fashion against a field that there were some stories about horses that they had ability that day, and B Dancer came out on top of them all. I like that he showed professionalism rating in the early stages, but he did hang on his left lead all the way through the stretch, never changing over to his right lead. For a horse that showed that unprofessionalism, this is a big step up in distance and class, going from the 6 furlongs all the way out to the 9 furlongs against some of the best contenders for the Kentucky Derby at this stage. He's got to overcome a far outside post position. Now, maybe that helps a little bit because he's not going to have to face much kickback, and maybe he gets into a decent stalking position, but he's likely going to have to cover ground. And there is some stamina pedigree on the bottom side, but his sire, B Jersey, has primarily produced one-turn horses and sprinters up until this point in his young career as a stallion. So definitely a lot to prove for B Dancer. Well, let's throw out my picks for this very intriguing edition of the Grade 2 Risen Star. And while I do believe that the number 11 Track Phantom is the horse to beat, and I'm expecting him to run well, he just seems like the most reliable of all the runners in here, given his recency and his upward trajectory. I put the number 3 Honor Marie on top of the main contenders. I just think he's the horse that is going to offer the best value. He still seems like he's on that upward trajectory as well, based on his 3 performances as a 2-year-old. He's going to need some pace to close into, but it seems like there will be some pace developing, especially among those horses that are drawn towards the outside of the starting gate. I think distance not going to be a problem for this horse, and he's just coming out for some lower profile connections, so you're probably not going to get as short a price as you will have to swallow on some other runners in this race who are coming in with very similar credentials. So the number 3, Honor Marie in the Risen Star on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.